Hello again, Art 1-2. This is your demonstration for complexity in pattern. So how to make something look more complex. So one way you can do that is just by adding detail. So I have my leaf pattern finished, and there's a little bit of detail in there, but I just want it to look a little more sophisticated. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to add a double line. So it's a little bit thicker, slightly. So I'm not necessarily filling in solid, I'm just doing a thicker double line. And then on the other side, I'm going to add little dots. So I think of really easy ways that aren't going to take a lot of time, but still look pretty cool. So I'm going to go back in and make the right edge thicker and add little dots along the left edge. So that makes the leaves look more complicated, but yet all I did was add another line and some dots. So remember that you're still trying to maintain good craftsmanship, and part of being able to see your complexity is having it nice and neat to look at, because in the end there's going to be a lot of craziness happening with all of your patterns. So I would go back and do that for each leaf to make that whole overall pattern look more complex. All right, then what I can also do is have light and dark areas inside my patterns. So on this one, I used a little bit smaller lines to make it darker and some further apart lines to make it look whiter. But let's say I want the inside of the tent to appear slightly darker. Then I'm going, and then the outside of the tent to be a little bit lighter. So inside of your pictures, you don't have to use themed pattern, because like inside of that area with the heart representing my family, like that's pretty small. I'm just going to use a pattern that looks cool to me, or I'll ask myself, do I want it to stand out and make it darker? Do I want it to be lighter, etc. In the tent, I probably could put a themed pattern, but I think I'm going to save an additional themed pattern for inside here. So in the tent, I'm just trying to play around with complex pattern. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to turn the lines into a double line. And then I'm going to go back in and put pattern inside. So then it kind of repeats, the little lines repeats where the tent stakes are at. So in this pattern, I want it to be fairly light, but I still feel like that's kind of not very detailed. I'm going to end up erasing the thumb outline. So therefore, I want to make sure I have pattern along the contour edge. So notice how the patterns here have created the edge of my arm. Well, I want that to happen all the way around my positive space. So therefore, I need a pattern by that thumb, because the thumb's going to get erased. Plus, part of complexity is pattern inside of pattern. So this one is supposed to be the calendar, representing all the months of quarantine. The little circles are supposed to be the dates. Add one there. All right, now I'm ready to add into it. So I can repeat something I've done before. I could do like a thicker line like I did in the leaves with little dots, or I'm going to add some hatching lines pulling away from the thumb so that the thumb shows a little bit better. I'm going to do long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short. Okay, here, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long. Alternating. So then suddenly the outline of the thumb is showing. So I'm going to do that along the bottom edge of my calendar boxes. So I would go and do that all the way throughout. And then I'd probably leave it alone. I think I might add something a little bit to it later, but I want to see, like, should that area stay lighter? And I would do that all throughout, but then let it be for a little bit. All right, so then you can add detail. You can add light areas inside the patterns. or keep areas light inside and add darker areas, or you can put pattern inside a pattern. So I'm adding pattern inside of my pattern that's already there. So if you have just an open shape that is part of your pattern, you can add pattern inside of pattern. So the one other thing about complexity is having some patterns be original. So you can take existing patterns and change them. So this is what I did for the calendar one. I looked at this one and I followed the steps and I got to about here with the circles, and then I changed it and made it my own so that it had meaning and symbolism that went with my theme. So I used the basic structure in this pattern, but I changed it. So that's one way to make it original. The other way is using this sheet of tracing paper. It's transparent, you can see through it, and you can create your own patterns, or you can create a symbol and turn it into a pattern. So I already created my symbol on a scratch piece of paper. I was trying to show that my family is very split during these times. My brother has to quarantine for his job. My parents are older. We can't really go see them. Also, I usually spend a lot of time with my brother. Like, we actually have friends together and we hang out. So the circle represents my family, and I just found something random to trace. So I use like this lid to like a spray bottle to trace for a circle for the bigger one. And then I have this zigzag line to show that my family is split. This one represents me, and I have a circle, and like I live all alone. Sometimes I feel all alone during this quarantine time. This piece is supposed to represent my brother, and then these two little dots are my parents. And so he's separate from my parents, he's separate from me. Everybody is just kind of separated during this time. So I created a symbol that has meaning, and now I'm going to turn it into a pattern. So I'm going to put the tracing paper on top. You could just draw it right on the tracing paper if you wanted to. I'm going to trace with pencil neatly. And if you used a ruler to draw with, use a ruler to trace with. Okay, then, and you want to make sure you have scratch paper. So don't do this on top of your final draft. I'd move your final draft out of the way. This part gets kind of messy. Okay, so I have graphite or pencil on top of the tracing paper right here. Now I need to flip it over, and I need to put graphite on the back side. So I'm going to flip it over. This part does not have to be perfect. You just want to get graphite on the back side. So if you've never used tracing paper, you're going to end up pressing down, and this graphite is going to transfer to your final draft. So the other thing you can do is if you want to bring up a picture on your phone, like let's say you find a symbol for something. So let's say I want a movie theater symbol, and I'm going to Google on my phone movie theater symbol, or just movie symbol, YN, search. I'm going to press images. Let's see I wanted to do this symbol. I could click on it, and then I'm going to share it with myself, or you can save. Or I had students try to get, like, actually that size actually is pretty good, the smaller one right here. So I could put the tracing paper on top of my phone, and I can just trace this onto the tracing paper, and then I can use it to make a pattern. So that's another way. And then I would put pattern inside of that to make it look complex. So that is another way that you can get more creative patterns. Okay, so I traced my symbol, I have graphite on the back side, then I'm ready to put it on my final draft. I'm going to put it, actually I may do it along the edge to start out with. And I'm going to go behind this piece. Okay, so I'm going to avoid tracing over where that little party streamer is. So I have some overlap with my imagery. Looks like it's on top of, covering. Okay, so I have a transfer of that symbol. It will be nice and light, and if it runs out, you can always put graphite on the back side and continue on. So then I'm going to transfer that again. I want it to line up. Okay, and I'm going to trace that one again. Oh, and I accidentally traced it into my hand. Okay, be careful. I was watching that and I watched myself do that. Okay, so that's all in the inside of my hand. I'm just making sure. Okay, so then I would trace that out as neatly as I possibly could. And then later we will go back and erase all of the pencil showing, just so you know. Okay, so that goes right up to my pinky finger, and then eventually I'm going to put a pattern inside of there. So something simple, maybe I'll do like cross hatching, or I'm crisscrossing lines. Right now it's just hatching. I could put like dots inside. I usually do like lines, dots, or a tiny shape, maybe lots of little circles. So in here maybe I want to do lots of tiny circles to make it look complicated, but how complicated is it to draw circles? And so I'm also, when I'm putting pattern in here, I'm making sure that like my pinky is gonna show. Okay, so then I wanna, actually I kinda like that. But if I wanted to cross my lines, then I would do cross hatching where I'm crossing the lines, which looks a little more sophisticated, a little more complex than just one line going one direction. It also makes it look slightly darker. So that is your demonstration for complexity. So I will say how I kind of hopped around a little bit. Like I put some in this one, I would finish all those lines, but then I'd let it be because I want some patterns to be bigger, I want some patterns to be smaller, but also I want some patterns with more detail and I want some patterns with less detail because you don't want everything complex. It's way too hard to look at. Okay, so have fun, create some original symbols, perhaps especially if you have a more meaningful piece, or you can use this tracing paper to trace off of your phone. Okay, have fun.